Figured I'd show you pretty much the process that I go through every week. This is my sorting day. Here are my drawers. One of my towers is pretty empty because I've been trying to remove some of my feeders and keep them in the fridge. So I've gone through about 5 or 6 drawers and emptied them in the past couple weeks. So far right now I have one entire drawer full. I've written dates on each one for the day that I start the egg bin. At the very top here I have all of my most mature worms, the ones that I'm using to help repopulate. So just a couple dead ones, but mostly it's mealworms and pupa. So I'll be separating the pupa today, putting them into my pupa tray, which is empty at the moment. And I'll show you how all that works. I also have some super mealworms that I've got going here. These are all babies from my first batch of supers. Here's some eggs. You can see them moving around a little bit. Lots and lots. Alright, so let's get started. What I usually do is start with my first most large group of worms. Just bring to my table that I have set up here. It's just an old ping pong table that I use. It's like the perfect height. And I just hand pick out my pupas one at a time. I used to get really weird about this and count every single one as I'm separating them, just to keep track of how many I'm pulling out. It gives me a rough idea of how many beetles I have in any given bin. But now I'm pretty good at just kind of eyeballing, saying, hey, this is about 100 or so. Try to keep these bins as clean as I can. Here's some of all these dead worms, or pupa. When I first got my first batch, it was black worms all over the place. Like, so many of them had died. Apparently that's a natural thing with your very first batch. I guess you get them shipped from a dealer online across the country, and then they come to where you live. They have to acclimate to your conditions, and so some of them die. But apparently the second generation, which is what we're seeing here, does a lot better. So that's why these are probably, let's see, I don't have a date on it. These are probably close to 3 months old, and very, very few deaths, because they're just used to this Florida weather now. So I just do this about once or twice a week now, separating the good pupa and the bins. If you do this daily, you get some pupa that are very, very fresh and soft, and you can squeeze them too hard on accident when you're pulling them out. So it's another reason not to do this on a daily basis, maybe every other day or every 3 days. That way they're a little bit harder, the skin is a little bit tougher, and you don't kill them or deform them or do something weird to their bodies. Generally, the pupa, they come to the top, they come to the surface, just the way that worms move, and they move stuff up. So it's usually easy to find most of your pupa if you don't mix up your bins too much. About 4 or 5 days ago, I put in new wheat bran bedding, so I don't need to separate the frass from this bin for probably another week or so. But you'll see in the next tray that I'm sorting through, they've eaten all the bran, and so I'll show you how I sift it out and keep all the worms at the same time. Let's go ahead and move to that. Let's put this away for now. You see the bran here is really thick, coarse grain. Whereas here, you can see the bran is now this frass, kind of like sand. It's real round and gritty. You have a lot of the shed skin on top. That's normal. It means they're growing, and I usually just take them out here, let the wind blow it, or blow it myself. If I do this without mixing it up, you can still see the pupa really well on top. I'm separating. If you want to separate by hand, so here's more of the dead worms. But I'm actually going to put this through the sifter, and the pupa are really going to be easy to pull out once I separate them. So let's go back in the garage and do that. Here for now. I used to, with my beetles, use one of these 3 tray bins, and I cut out the bottom and hot glued a screen into it, and it works just wonderful. Except I made a huge mistake, and I let the beetles, this is my only beetle bin, and I let them get really deep. And research has shown that the less crowded they are, the more eggs they produce. So I really didn't get too many worms from my first batch. I started out with 15,000 worms, and I should have had about 1 million, but I think in the end I'm getting just about maybe 20,000, maybe 25. So I'm not getting the numbers I was expecting, and I'm pretty sure it's because I overcrowded my beetles. Now I have this 3-drawer tray with beetles, and this is as crowded as they are. Could possibly still be too crowded, but they're all at the top hanging out. When it comes to sifting out my worms and my frass, I use these 2 sifters along with a red colander, which I'll show you in just a little bit. This is a really fine mesh, and we'll use that last. But first I'll use this bigger mesh. I'm not sure what size it is, but I just picked this up from Walmart, so I'm sure you all know exactly where to find that. Generally I just scoop, and you'll see the frass just pours right out. With this size mealworm, you're not going to get too many mealworms that fall through, but as you can see, there are tiny little babies in here. Even though these are all generally the same age, eggs can take between 4 and 40 days to hatch. So these are obviously the late hatchers that were in this original frass. So that's why I use a smaller sieve to go back through this a second time to catch all these little ones. But for now, I'm just going to use an empty tray. Pour these big ones out into it, rinse and repeat. If you get the right angle and the right shaking motion, you can just do a continuous pour. All the frass will go straight through, and you'll keep nothing but the mealworms. Side to side. This is my favorite part of doing this today. It's just awesome to see all that frass falling. In case you don't know, frass is a really good fertilizer. It's natural, it's great for plants. So when I'm done with this, I usually empty it into a new tray, collect it all from the day, and then just pour it in the yard with my plants. And some people actually sell it. It's not really expensive when you sell it, because people aren't going to pay too much for it. It's a great fertilizer. So again, I rinse and repeat the process to get this baby mealworms. Make sure there's none on my table. Nope. Because this is a finer mesh, it takes a little bit longer for this sifter to work. But now I'm getting all the bigger chunks of bran, so I'm not wasting any, and any else little babies that are in there as well. So jump it back in, rinse, repeat. Again, if you get the right angle, you can have a continuous motion, sift all the frass out, save a little bit of time. While I'm sorting, this is a little scooper that I designed, and no, I didn't design it, I saw it online, but I 3D printed it on a 3D printer. It's pretty good for picking up small group. I actually use it when I go to count out my mealworms and weigh them. Just a good scoop. So you have like a container here, you can just scoop and then weigh it to see how many you have. So we'd like to have a bigger one in the future, but it works for now. Pretty hot day today. Some muggy. One of these days my mealworm farm will be so large I'll have to hire my children to do this for me. For now it's just something I do once a week. Not hard, just takes a long time to do. Especially the more trays you have. As you can see, there are 0 mealworms left in here. They're all being caught by the sieve. So it's always a good idea to have more than one sifter with different hole sizes. Always sift with a large hole first, and then go back and sift with a fine one. This is going to be my grass tray. Let's put this off to the side for now. And then we rinse and repeat. Before I start this, I usually want to pick out any of the pupa. See how easy they are to find now because there's no substrate to hide them. And again, naturally they come to the surface because all the moving worms below them kind of lift them up. This is probably 3 to 4,000 worms right here that we can weigh and find out. I use grams when I weigh. No, I don't. I use ounces. I think it's 0.5 is 1,000. I want to weigh out my bin first and center it to 0 it. And put it in. Not 0.5, it's 5 ounces is about 1,000. So yeah, this is just over 3,000 mealworms, maybe 3,500. I think it's a 0.42 exactly is 1,000. So I always round up because I want to sell them and want to make sure I usually give more than the customer actually pays for. Because some will die during transit and stuff. But that's 1 week of growing. We started back on April 30th. Today is July 15th. So it took about 3 months, 2.5 months to get to this size. As you can see, there's still really small ones, and most of them are a nice mature size. And when you see them start to pupate, it's a good time. It lets you know that the majority of these are ready to be sold off or used as feed for your animals, because it's about as large as they're going to get before they pupate. So, for now. Here's where I keep my bran. You can see I'm running out, but I have another bag in the freezer right there. The freezer is what helps kill all the mites that might be in the bran. You can freeze them or you can bake them, the bran that is. If you bake it, I think it's $3.50 for 20 minutes and stir, and then do another 20 minutes and stir. I don't know, you can look online to find out how long to bake. But I freeze mine, I just keep it in overnight, and I know it'll die. So there you go, there's a new tray, fresh bedding. When I'm done doing this for all the trays, I usually cut carrots and sweet potatoes and put them in for their liquid source. For now, that tray is done. 2 trays done. Working on the next. Again, we get rid of all of the shedding. The black stuff in this tray is just old beetle parts from when they were beetles and laying eggs. You see these worms are a little bit smaller. The date on this is 5/7, so they're a week later than the last group. The substrate is still pretty good, so I don't need to really sift these. I probably sifted them last week, so we're good for now. This is ready to go. Check on the next bin. Same thing. There we go. You see the top has pretty good substrate, but if you dig down below, it's really a lot of frass. So this bin I'm probably going to separate today. Bin. A little bit of bran. Don't want to add too much because I want them to eat all of this in the next 2 weeks, and probably by that time they'll be ready to be sold off. So if I put too much bran in here, then it's just going to be a waste. Same thing, rinse and repeat. This bin is actually pretty good. It's got a little bit of frass at the bottom. But they're alright. So there's a lot of bran still. So you can see the worms are getting smaller and smaller with each tray as I go down. Still probably a lot of eggs in there that haven't hatched. And this tray is 3 weeks old. You see a lot of movement, real small worms. The smaller they are, the less frass they produce. So this is still really thick with bran and eggs, I'm sure. And this was my last tray from last week. You won't see any worms, but you'll see the bran moving. I hold it still. You see the worm right there. These usually don't take a lot of required care the first few weeks. It's when they get to about 4 or 5 weeks that they start getting a really big appetite for vegetables and whatnot. And the supers, oh yeah, I need to separate this because there's a lot of bran, frass at the bottom. Super mealworms are really a different species than regular mealworms. They're really fast. They like dark, really more than the regular mealworms do. Regular mealworms, they really don't care. The supers, they need something to hide under. That's just how they work. Also with breeding supers, it's a different process. You have to separate them individually. You have to put each one into its own little container. And so you just put the hole punch in the lid. And over time that stresses them out and they turn into pupa. And then you can separate the pupa into the beetle bin. You see some pupa didn't quite make it. Wow, this is a large pupa. There's a little worm that's dying or almost dead. But for the most part. Because I don't have that many beetles, I will generally keep this tray for a few weeks. My other beetles, I separate the bran every single week because I have a lot of beetles. But here I don't feel the need. I also mix it with bran and oats just to give them a little bit more texture, give them choices about what they want to eat. And of course I'll put veggies in here when I'm done as well. And I can separate my pupa, put it back into the container. I usually have this thing stacked full of these cups, but I'm finishing up my very first batch of supers that I ordered, and so these are the last of them. Oh, I don't think that's going to make it. Let's see. So it looks like I just have one super left. They're still small, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put them in here. And play with your friends. There he goes. They're very social, so when they're with each other, they do not pupate on their own. They have to be separated. Every now and then, I'll get a dead one in here, and it's just a big black mass. It stinks to high heaven. So hopefully that will change after the second generation starts going through this process. So now that's it for my supers. It's really weird. I don't mind touching any of these beetles or them being on my hands, but these creep me out a little bit. Just because you can feel their legs a lot more, I guess. But all beetles like things to crawl on, so a paper towel roll is always a good thing to put in. Or if you have egg cartons, you can put those in too. These trays are great because they hold, 1 to 5,000 or so mealworms each one. The whole tower cost, I think it was $25 at Sam's Club. I saw them at Michael's for $30 as well. It's still relatively cheap. I actually have a third one in case I ever need to expand. But it takes about 12 to 16, so I average about 14 weeks to go from egg to mature worm size. So that's why I have at least 14 trays, 1 tray a week. And then I have extra trays for things like my supers and my pupa. When it comes to the pupa, some of them will not survive. It's a humidity thing. So what I usually do is put an egg crate or egg flat on top, and I spray it with water because they love the humidity. And when they do turn into beetles, they climb onto here to get to some of that liquid. I spray this probably 2 or 3 times a day, and it helps increase the humidity over them. And that's pretty simple. As soon as they turn into beetles, I open up a beetle bin and I just shake them off into the bin. Okay, so now let's separate our beetles. Beetles are a little bit larger, wider, thicker than mealworms, so I don't have to use this. I can, but they like to crawl out of it. What they don't crawl out of well is a smooth surface on this colander. So this is actually what I use to separate my beetles from the substrate with all the eggs in it. I'll show you that process right now. Let's get rid of this old food. Any more old food? Oh, maybe in the middle. I did have 5 pieces of sweet potato. I guess that's the last one. So I'm going to start with a big scoop and just shake the substrate, the frass. If there is any, and the eggs all fall down. Beetles stay in the colander. I do have some dead beetles, not in this tray much, but in my 2 older trays, a lot of dead beetles just sitting around. So probably once every month or so, put all the beetles into a bigger tray, add some food, and then transfer the beetles that cling to that food to a new tray. That way I separate my dead ones from the live ones. So I can show you what that looks like today, because I probably need to separate my dead. It's been a couple weeks. Another reason to separate your dead beetles is that some beetles will lay eggs on the dead beetles. So if you have too many in there, then and you throw your dead beetles out, then you're throwing away eggs. So if you separate your dead beetles often, you have less of a chance of that happening. Let's see, I got every single beetle out, nothing left over, and this is just nothing but bran and thousands, hopefully thousands and thousands of eggs. beetles will lay eggs after probably the first week, 4 days or so of turning into a beetle or turning dark. They'll lay for about a month. They may live longer than a month, but they usually don't lay eggs when they're older. So that's another reason to separate your beetles into multiple trays so you can have them around the same age. A lot of people feed off the older beetles to their pets or throw them in the yard for decomposition, fertilizer, whatever. But this is gold right here. This has all the eggs in it. This is your future. So you cannot mess this part up. Otherwise you're doing all of this for nothing. You see some eggs sticking to the bottom of the tray. Another purpose for my little scoop. I scrape those off so we don't lose any eggs. Every now and then you'll see some mealworms with your beetles because they were probably from an egg that was on a dead beetle that you missed the last time you sorted. So it happens, not often. I don't have any this week, but last week I had about 4 or 5. Oh, there's a little one. Right there. So I can separate him. I'll put him in one of my older trays. Hey there, buddy. Got a straggler. Look at all these eggs. Just scrape them off. Probably. You can't really see the eggs. You just have to know that they're there. Funny thing is, this tray, next week, if I keep it empty, you're going to see some tiny little babies crawling around because there's still eggs that are microscopic that I missed. And that's just part of the process. Alright, so as you can see, I separated all my beetles. I have nothing but beetle frass and substrate and hopefully thousands and thousands of eggs in here. See if after a week you can see any moving. No, not really. So just after a week, they're still working on hatching. I have 2 new trays. This is a lot, probably 3-4 inches deep. So we need to separate the 3 beetle trays that I had into 2 of these trays. I could probably keep them in one gigantic tray, but for some reason I have a fear about making them too deep. So more trays are better in my opinion. Before I pour them in though, I like to write the date on it. That way I can keep track of when the eggs were transferred. It was July 16th. First, so I don't chip out any eggs by mistake. I think it's a sign of how my little farm is growing. I used to just have 1 tray a day. When I do this, now I have to do 2 trays a day. See that as a good thing. these are good to go. Other good thing about labeling the date is if you had to rearrange your drawers for whatever reason, you can keep them all organized and in order. And that's honestly pretty much it. A few other things I need to do is put that on the yard and put some food in here so that the active ones cling onto it, and I can put them into a new beetle tray for this week. I'll go ahead and dump the rest of this in here. I bought a 25-pound bag of bran back in, was it probably March, if not April at the latest, but I think March, and it's lasted me until middle of July. So the bran is, I bought it for 15 bucks for a 25-pound bag. It lasts you quite a while. Now of course you're going to go through it a lot more the more you have. Here's my new bag, just sitting in the freezer. I'll keep that as long as the wife will allow me in there to kill off any mite eggs that might be in there. Mites will completely ruin any trays that they're in. They'll take over, and you'll see them. There'll be tiny little white dots crawling up and around the sides. It's a nightmare when you have them. You kind of have to just start over. So preventive care is important for your mites. There will be eggs here. But yeah, that's it. I have a fly trap. I have vinegar and Dawn detergent in there, just a couple drops. That helps attract and kill the flies. They were bad a couple weeks ago. They've gotten a lot better. That's it. Alright, so I've cleaned up my table. I have all my beetles. I have some carrots that I've peeled. Some people just use baby carrots or cut them into chunks or just put one whole carrot in there. I like to cut mine as small as I can because this is all surface area. And the more surface area you have, the more of your worms or your beetles can eat. And I think that's another reason why a lot of you have mealworms that are different sizes in your containers. Only so many of them can eat at once, and the ones that eat grow. So if you increase the amount that can eat, then maybe you can increase the amount that can grow. I also have sweet potatoes that I've sliced pretty thin. Again, it's about surface area. I could have cut this into 4 pieces, but in this Florida heat, it would have rotted away before it was eaten, whereas these will probably be eaten completely, with the exception of the skin. I'll just have like the skin left in the trays, and those are easy to pick out. So, I'll take my trays, put a couple sweet potatoes in, scatter the carrots. The carrots are going to go real quick. Sweet potatoes are a little bit more long term. So we have a snack for now and liquid for the rest of the week. We donate. Do the same for the beetles. They love sweet potatoes. So I'm just going to set this here so you can see them swarming while I do the rest of these trays. And these carrots will be gone in just a day or two. Be careful, you don't want to give your worms away out of the tray, so make sure they're not high up off the sides. Oops. Two more. And along carrots, so I'll add more sweet potatoes. Potatoes are just loving that moisture. Leftover sweet potato from last week. Actually, I think that was Wednesday, just a few days ago. Generally, I do this probably twice a week. It's really just whenever it's needed, when I see that they've eaten it all. Then I do it again, about twice a week. You don't want them in for too long, because they'll start to mold and mildew. You also don't want vegetables that are too juicy, because they will rot your substrate. So that's why I would go with carrots and sweet potatoes. There's no juice. But plenty of moisture. The worms in here are still pretty small, so sweet potatoes will be really helpful because they'll last, won't curl up and shrivel up like carrots do over time. Oops, check dates. And the two trays I just created, I won't do anything for because they're just eggs and it's just a waste of food. I'll put some in with my supers. Some people put food in with their pupa tray. Wheat bran. And I know there's not really any big worms in here. I'll just throw these in here. Just in case. As you can see at this point, I have a bunch of live beetles that are active, that are swarming. So I'll simply wipe them off. And this is the easiest, fastest way that I know for transferring beetles or separating live beetles from dead beetles. You just do this, you rinse, and repeat. There may still be some dead beetles that stick to this, but for the most part, I only get the ones that are active and moving. Because dead beetles don't have sticky legs anymore. Already I'm starting to think about population density and wondering if this is too many for this container. So what I'll probably do is with the rest, I'll put them in a second container. Because again, the more you spread them out, the more eggs they lay, apparently. So, this is the new home, fellas. Enjoy. decimeter, I guess. Or for every 100 square centimeters, you should have no more than 14. So you have to kind of square it off, think of it like that. There shouldn't be more than 14 here. If there are, and it's too dense, I'm going to spread them out more. So I think this is pushing it density-wise. This is what my original beetle tray looked like when I had the big bin. There's just nothing but black beetles everywhere. So they do lay eggs, but these will lay more eggs if they're spread out. So over the next couple hours, I'm going to keep coming back here and checking on this and wiping them off and do a new tray as needed. So just rinse and repeat all day long until I don't really see anything moving. You're not going to be able to get every last one, but the majority is what's important. And then I usually feed the dead ones off to my chickens. So I'm going to put these back in here just so they can be with their friends for now, until I get some meat ram in here. Otherwise they'll be on their backs. Alright, and that's it.